Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome into the UTEP Wisconsin post-game show. I'm your host, Chris Sylvester. On Twitter, I'm at MLB Insider Chris, but today I am covering the UTEP Wisconsin football game, a game that the Wisconsin Badgers ended up coming out on top 37-26. Wisconsin improves to 3-1 on the season. UTEP does drop to 1-3 on the season and falls to 0-2 on the road. Wisconsin keeps that winning streak alive at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome in, everybody. An early start today, a 12 o'clock start on the East Coast, a 9 o'clock start on the West Coast, a 10 o'clock start in El Paso, and an 11 o'clock start out in Madison where the game happened. I mean, you come into the season as a UTEP fan, and you look at the first 4 games on the schedule, a brutal non-conference schedule. And before seeing this team play a heck of a game against Oklahoma to start off the season at home, you weren't really sure what to expect. You had Nick Lamison, your quarterback, the preseason All-Conference USA quarterback pick by the coaches, coming back for his senior season. The 3 big-time running backs from last year, Vernon Frazier, Leland Myers, and Joe Banyard, all leaving due to graduation. You have Nate Jeffrey coming back, the sophomore, who showed that he was very explosive last year, but in a very limited role. Strong receiving core with Leslie, Edwards, Tomlinson, Perry, Wenrick, Trail. So certainly there was a lot of ways that could go. I think the big key was going to be the offensive line and the defensive line and the secondary on the defense, just the whole defensive side of the ball for UTEP. And UTEP has played outstanding on defense today. Don't let those 37 points by Wisconsin fool you. Obviously, it's very hard to go into an environment like Camp Randall that seats over 80,000 people as a Conference USA school and play as well as UTEP did. That game was 23-19 with 3 minutes and 20 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter. That's when James White punched in a 2-yard touchdown run that made it 30-19 Wisconsin, and that ultimately salvaged the victory for the Badgers. On the ensuing kickoff, Mike Edwards fumbled the football. Wisconsin got it back. First play from the line of scrimmage on their 26, Wisconsin ran with their tight end Melvin Gordon, who was running a lot on the tight end around today. He was able to punch one in. It was 37-19, so as a UTEP fan at that point, you're just hoping that maybe UTEP can come back down and get another score so it doesn't look so bad. They were able to do that. Mike Edwards and Nick Lamison, the former JUCO teammates at Mount Sac, were able to hook up for the second time of the day. Edwards caught a 62-yard pass from Nick. Valadez's kick was good, and the final was 37-26 after UTEP was unable to convert on a onside kick. So, real quick, going over the scoring summary. It started off great. UTEP got Monte Ball to fumble for the first time in his college career. You would think how this guy, Monte Ball, is legit, of course. He's gonna be probably gonna be a first-round draft pick in the NFL next season. Was a Heisman candidate last year. Coming into this season, certainly was one of the favorites to win the Heisman. Didn't have the greatest first 3 games of the season in the world. Wisconsin was able to move the ball on their first drive as they elected to receive against the Miners, and Joel Stave, the redshirt freshman quarterback, was looking really good until he handed off to Ball around the 35-yard line of UTEP. Wisconsin was in UTEP territory, and Monte Ball fumbled for the first time. I believe Drew Thomas fell on it, and that was obviously a huge momentum switch right there, as it looked like Wisconsin was going to come down the field on their first drive and score on the Miners, but UTEP was unable to do anything with that turnover. They punted it away to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was unable to score. Wisconsin punted it back to UTEP, who got some pretty good field position after another great punt by Ian Campbell, and we'll talk about Campbell in a little bit. Obviously, one of the best punters in the nation, up for the Ray Guy Award. That is a handout given to only the best punters in the nation. Ian Campbell obviously was a great punter last season, and he once again showed this season why he was great. But UTEP got the ball back, and at their 39-yard line, Nick Lamison dropped back to pass.
Difference it feels like between here and where they'll get back home tonight.
Thank you, Lewis. The penalty against Wisconsin. So now Lamison back to work and throwing deep across the middle, and a touchdown from Michael Edwards. And a quick strike, 39 yards, and UTEP scores first.
So you heard it right there. That was the audio. Nick Lamison to Mike Edwards. A big hookup. At that point, as a UTEP fan, you're up 6-0, about to kick the extra point with Steven Valadez. He did miss one last week on a bad snap, but was able to convert the rest of his PATs last week against New Mexico State in UTEP's win against New Mexico State. But, you know, you go up on Wisconsin 6-0, and you have all the confidence in the world, but then Steven Valadez gets his extra point blocked, didn't get it up high enough. That was returned back for a touchdown by Devin Smith, and that made it a 6-2 ball game. Not too often in football do you see a 6-2 ball game, but that it was. And Wisconsin was getting the ball, so Wisconsin gained back the momentum, you could say, and they proved it on their next drive. They went right down the field on the Miners and were able to score on a Monte Ball touchdown. But that was the last touch of the game that Monte Ball would get. He left with what appeared to be a head injury. He was getting hit hard by those UTEP defensive linemen up at the line. They were doing a pretty good job of containing him. He did end up running for 40 yards on 9 carries today, including a 22-yard run. But I got to say that UTEP did a good job, of course, forcing that fumble. And you don't want to say a good job by knocking out Monte Ball of the game, but they were able to just swarm him, hit him hard, and that's what you got to do as a defensive player. You can't let the run happen, and they were able to contain Monte Ball while he was in the game. But James White was huge for Wisconsin. He ran for 65 yards on 15 carries. Next time Wisconsin got the ball, they ran it in for a 3-yard touchdown run. That made it 16-6. UTEP could not get a score. They punted the ball back to Wisconsin, and those secondary issues from UTEP just have been problematic in every single game they played this season. The big play has really hurt them, going all the way back to opening night against Oklahoma. Landry Jones on that 3rd and 11, which could have changed the whole entire outcome of that game. UTEP could have beaten Oklahoma if they could have avoided that big play, because it would have been 7-0 at halftime. Of course, if they would have made their field goals, it certainly would have helped as well. Dakota Warren missed 2, then Valadez missed that 1 in the 3rd quarter that completely shanked to the right. That game, of course, UTEP ended up losing 24-7 to Oklahoma, but you go back to the Oklahoma game, Landry Jones to Kenny Stills for a huge, I believe it was a 68-yard touchdown reception, and then the next week, Bo Wallace of Ole Miss was able to connect for 2 50-plus yard passes for touchdowns, and then last week against New Mexico State, obviously they won, and there were still a couple big passing plays. A 36-yard touchdown reception that was just blown coverage by the corner, Darren Woodard. Darren Woodard and Drew Thomas have done a fine job on those corners this year at holding their men, but just way too easy for the other teams to get open and get down the field quickly. That made it the 23-6 Wisconsin lead before Valadez was able to hit on a 45-yard field goal to end the half. So you go in the locker room at halftime, it's 23-9. You're not exactly out of the game. It's only a 14-point game. Wisconsin has been a team that has let every team get close by the time the fourth quarter comes around. Of course, you had Wisconsin barely beating the FCS school Northern Iowa 26-21, losing at Oregon State 10-7, then coming back last week, and if it wasn't for a missed field goal by the Utah State kicker, would have lost 17-16, but Wisconsin did win that game last week 16-14. And of course, here won today, but you keep all that in mind, you know you have a chance, excuse me, you know you have a chance coming down the stretch here, and the Miners weren't able to do much on their first drive. UTEP was able to get some stops on the defensive side of the ball, and that's when Nick Lamison and his offense were able to steadily drive down the field. They converted 4 of 4 fourth down today, did UTEP. They were 5 of 18 on third downs, which hurt them, but obviously ended up in a good result as they were 4 for 4 on fourth down efficiency. UTEP was able to drive all the way down to the Wisconsin 8. Zay Williams, I was very impressed with Zay Williams. We'll get to him too. Was able to run it in from 8 yards out. That made it 23-16. Then Wisconsin marched right down the field and missed a field goal from their new kicker who they brought in the game. They brought in Russell to kick after French kicked one out of bounds. Russell was 4 for 4 on the extra points, but a 33-yard field goal attempt went way wide left for French, so that obviously gave UTEP a lot of optimism. UTEP marched right back down the field, completing a couple of fourth down conversions. Like I said, they were 4 for 4 on fourth downs today. Couldn't get in the end zone after too many false start penalties, too many holding penalties from UTEP today. Steven Valadez, another 40-plus yard field goal, just snuck in the uprights, made it 23-19 Wisconsin, and now it's up to the defense. If your defense can get a stop, you're down 4. You got to trust Lamison and the offense to get right back down the field and have a chance to put the ball into the end zone and give you a lead and give you your first win ever on the road at a BCS school. But it was just not meant to be for the UTEP Miners once again today. They dropped to 0-17 on the road at BCS opponents. James White was able to punch it in from 2 yards out to make it 30-19. Like I said, on the ensuing kickoff, Mike Edwards fumbled it. First play, Melvin Gordon was able to run it back to the house for 26 yards. 37-19 was the score. Lamison was able to hook up with Edwards to make it look a little bit closer. 37-26 is our final from Camp Randall Stadium. When we get back, we will be discussing the numbers. We'll talk about Lamison's strong performance. He has not thrown an interception through the first 4 games of this season. And we'll also talk about the inefficiency from Nathan Jeffrey, who only carried the ball 8 times today for 9 yards after that amazing 177-yard game against the Oklahoma Sooners. You're listening to the UTEP Wisconsin postgame show on Spreaker.com. Welcome back, football fans. I'm Chris Sylvester, and you're listening to the UTEP Wisconsin postgame show. Wisconsin able to sneak out a victory here against the Miners, 37-26. It was really a game the whole time. UTEP was only down by 4 with 3:21 left to go in the ball game, but Wisconsin was too much for UTEP in the fourth quarter, as UTEP's fourth quarter struggles continue this year. You know, the fourth quarter has just killed UTEP. It was 10-7 the first game of the season. Oklahoma was beating the Miners 10-7, but ended up outscoring UTEP 14-0 in the last quarter. Landry Jones was able to hook up with his tight end for a touchdown, and then Damian Williams of the Sooners was able to break off a huge run to make it 24-7, the final against the UTEP Miners. That was the start of the fourth quarter problems for UTEP, as the next week